You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Voyager episode, Nemesis. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
Wait, Voyager episode Nemesis? Not the movie?
Not the TNG movie, no. Nemesis. Did you watch the wrong thing, Father Cory?
I did. Well, that's all right. No. How's it going, Dom?
All right. And we're also joined by Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to stick around to the end of the show. We have more of your fabulous listener feedback to share. And I want to encourage you all to share the podcast with your friends. Help us grow this community, reach more listeners. There's more Star Trek than ever, and we've got plenty of Star Trek to talk about, and we'd love to have more Trekkies join us in this discussion. And finally, I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you are sure to enjoy called Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, which you can find wherever fine podcasts are found or at mysterious.fm. So we are talking about Nemesis. This is a 4th season Voyager episode. And Jimmy, can you give us a recap of this episode?
This week, Picard and the gang take the Enterprise to Romulus, where it turns out that the Romulans have a young clone of Picard, and he's killed the entire Senate and taken over the Romulan Empire.
I have watched the wrong one.
Yeah.
Wait. Sorry, wrong Nemesis.
Oh, okay.
Would rather have been that Nemesis than...
This week, Commander Chakotay is flying near a sphere when his shuttle is downed in a crash. He locates himself in a group of funny talkers who answer to the name of Vori. They are in a clash with their nemesis, the Kraden. Their tellings indicate that the Kradens are beasts who flame their villages, destroy their plantings, nullify their fathers and brothers, and treat their sisters as playthings. They even leave the nullified funny talkers upturned so that they cannot descend to the gloried way after. The funny talkers thus have the rages against the Nemesis and want to nullify them all. Chakotay says it isn't his clash and he needs to call out to Voyager. However, he's in the middle of a clash zone, so it's easier to tell that than to do it. In the soon after, Chakotay glimpses examples of Kraden beastliness, including nullifying innocents in a funny talker settlement and taking a little girl to an extermination center. He comes to fathom that the Nemesis really are beasts. He decides to clash alongside the funny talkers and nullify the Nemesis. Meanwhile, Voyager has learned about Chakotay's shuttle crash, and the unseen Ambassador Treen offers to help them retrieve Chakotay, who they believe has been captured by their vicious Nemesis. But since Treen is unseen, it's obvious they're setting us up for a twist reveal. Tuvok goes down to the planet to find Chakotay with a contingent of the unseen Treen soldiers. We then cinematically fast-walk to where Chakotay is clashing alongside the funny talkers to nullify the beastly Kraden. A Kraden beast walks in front of him and says it's Commander Tuvok, but Chakotay doesn't believe this lie, and his glimpses show it is clearly a Kraden beast and not Tuvok. The beast keeps telling, and it tells Chakotay that the funny talkers have brainwashed him to battle in this clash, and that nothing before the now was real. Chakotay begins to fathom what the Kraden beast is telling, and he starts perceiving him as Tuvok. Tuvok then proves his claim about brainwashing by taking him back to the settlement, and all the dead and captured funny talkers are alive again and greet Chakotay exactly the way they did before. Back on Voyager, Janeway says she doesn't know which side in the conflict is telling the truth about the viciousness of the other. They just don't know enough about the situation. Ambassador Treen shows up and says he was glad to be able to help Chakotay, but Chakotay snubs him and tells Janeway he wishes it was as easy to stop hating as to start. The end.
Father Cory, your overall thoughts?
Well, first of all, I'm impressed that Jimmy could do that whole summary by using the strange language without breaking into a laugh. But I really wish this would have been the movie instead of this episode. This is just such a blah episode. I commenting to Dom before, it's like, this is one of those Voyager episodes I don't remember. I don't even remember watching. I know I did. I've watched all of Voyager at least once, the entire series, and watched it when it was airing. I don't remember this because this is pretty non-memorable. A lot of running through studio forests and fighting, and yeah.
How about you, Jimmy?
I didn't remember it either, but I didn't dislike it as much as Father Cory does. I thought it was okay. I thought it had flaws. I thought the constant funny talking got a little old.
Very tedious.
Yeah, but I thought it was okay and interesting in ways. Apparently, the funny talkers put Chakotay in the equivalent of a giant outdoor holodeck and brainwashed him and got him to come over to their side, which he does in stages if you watch carefully. I mean, first he's like Mr. Neutral, this is not my fight. And then and I like how Chakotay is, working with these people even though he's not committed to their battle and he's trying to be neutral and understanding. And eventually, as the conflict progresses, he starts using their vocabulary, which is understandable for just communication reasons. You'd start using the language of the people you're around so they understand you. And he does gradually transition over to their side where he's willing to not be rescued in order to stay with them and fight. And so I thought it was actually, while flawed, I thought it was interestingly done. And I enjoyed it fundamentally.
I found the language very tedious, and according to the screenwriter for this one, Ken Biller, he said that in Star Trek, aliens they either speak perfect English or they have these weird, hokey, stilted, formalized English, and he wanted to do something a little different with this, where they use synonyms for common words. But there was a subtlety, as you point out, where we can track how Chakotay, the brainwashing is working on him by how deeply he gets into using that language by the end. And so there is a bit of a subtlety in that. So that's fine. But yeah, I didn't remember it until I watched the first teaser of the scene, and I'm like, oh, it's this one with the language, which like I said, I found the language tedious, but I understand perhaps what they were trying to do.
I think it's a nice idea. I think they just overdid it.
Right. Yeah. I find the idea, the one of the themes apparently of this one is how easy it is to demonize our enemies when they don't look like us. Like we, as a viewer, we're supposed to sympathize immediately with the humans. And I note that the alien humans here have no prosthetics on their faces. They look as human as you could possibly look. And I think, again, intentional to try to get the audience to identify with them and immediately conclude that the aliens that look like a cross between
they look like Nausicaans.
Right. Yeah. Or and a cross with them and Schwarzenegger's Predator. Like there's this, they look scary. And so we immediately demonize them.
And we don't know if the Vori actually look like that because much of the episode is, as you said, an outdoor hologram, holodeck. And so we don't know if there's, because they do say in the episode that the Vori use this for all aliens that happen to fall onto the planet. They use this same technique. So if a Klingon ended up there, would they all look like Klingons? And that's kind of part of the question of it.
Was it a holodeck? Do they actually say that?
No, what the doctor says at the end is that it's likely a combination of mind control techniques.
Right.
But it's apparently automatic because if they were just actors, then they wouldn't greet Chakotay exactly the same way.
Right.
Because they go into the planet and it starts out the exact same, everything's exact same. Or not the planet, the settlement.
The village. Yeah.
The second time they go in, it's the exact same. Like the girl doesn't remember him or anything like that.
Right.
So don't know if those were just hollow projections or some equivalent thereof.
Or robots or something. Yeah.
Seems like a lot of effort to do your recruiting more than just a regular boot camp would be. You know what I mean? It just seems weird.
It's not just because again, these are not exactly willing participants. He got shot down and was, as Jimmy said in the summary, basically held hostage.
Right.
Yeah. Also, I mean, we have had extensive brainwashing efforts here on Earth, like the CIA's MK Ultra mind control program in the mid 20th century. Which the CIA says didn't work, but, CIA
that's what they want
says.
you to believe.
Right. Well, I believe them. I believe everything the CIA says. So yeah, and that's the other big theme is the propaganda, being conditioned, to believe things. It's Chakotay is led down a literal and figurative path, like each step along the way, where first he has to kill one of the Kraden in defending someone, and that's a big first step. Is when you're conditioning someone to get them to cross that moral line, and once you can get someone to cross the moral line, it could be easier the next time to get them to cross that line again. And so it was very interesting to see. There's some thought was put into how do we lead Chakotay down this path of indoctrination. So I did like that aspect of it. I mean, it's a good story. It just wasn't executed well, I think, is really my bottom line.
And that's a step up from what a lot of Voyager is.
Right. That's the problem. Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
I did like at the beginning of his journey, I like how Chakotay is Mr. Reasonable. He's down here. He doesn't know anything about these people. So he's very open and honest. He's not taking sides, but he's not doing it antagonistically. Right. He's not, because he needs these people to help him. He's not like, hey, I have nothing to do with your conflict and I'm going to shove that in your face.
Right.
He's more understanding. Like at one point, one of the characters tells him, you just don't understand the Nemesis. And he says, no, I suppose I don't. And then the guy replies, beg the power that you believe in that you never will. Right. It's a very nice exchange.
Well, and he talks about his fight as part of the Maquis against the Cardassians and saying, very similar. The Cardassians weren't very nice either. He kind of low plays it, but, clear too, the Cardassians weren't exactly the most gentle opponents either.
Right. I mean, if Chakotay, if anybody can identify with what's going on here in this conflict. It's interesting to see the slow reveal of things. We don't see Voyager at all until Act 2 of this story, and we don't even see they variously call them the Kraden or the Treen. We don't see them.
Well, Treen is the ambassador's personal name.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's why. Okay. So the Kraden is the people name.
Kraden, or Nemesis is the other word they use from.
Right. And we don't see the Kraden until the fourth act, until the very, that final reveal.
Well, we see the ones that we see them as part of the indoctrination program.
Right. But we don't see them from the Voyager viewpoint. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you. And so it's an interesting slow reveal of things, and I think this isolating Chakotay in this instance was really effective in that. This is a Chakotay heavy episode. I mean, this is focusing on,
and they came up with it because there had been this criticism of y'all aren't doing anything with Chakotay, so they came up with a Chakotay-centric episode, which gets all of the rest of the Voyager cast in except 7 of 9.
Is Harry? With Father Cory and I were talking about that earlier. Is Harry in this one too? Do we see him?
I don't remember seeing Harry either.
Yeah,
maybe not.
But he's forgettable anyway. So
yeah. But and of course they kind of play the slow reveal, not just from Chakotay's point of view, but also from our point. They let us have the slow reveal as well, because they, of course, as they're talking on Voyager about the Kraden ambassador coming, they don't mention that it's the Kraden ambassador. They don't mention anything about him, just that he's coming and he's sending troops and he's going to help out. And there's troops are told that if they find Chakotay to get him back to the ship and all that kind of stuff. And then again, it's not until towards the end that we see that the ambassador dealing with is actually the Kraden, and the Vori are the bad guys.
Yeah, right. Though when you look at it, I look at everything from a writing plot perspective, and so it's like, okay, we're hearing all about this Treen guy, and we've never seen him, and we keep never seeing him. We're setting up for a twist ending.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. That's you. Yeah. You could see the writer's trope at work here. If you're talking about the guy, you'd show him. You'd see him on a screen. He'd show up in person. Yeah.
Yep.
Couple of interesting other themes that we get is there's a big discussion in the beginning where there's that the young man that Chakotay is supposed to bond with, Rafe, I think his name is, and there's Raffin, thank you. And there's this whole discussion about courage and how he's a coward. I'm not going to use the funny talk because I just can't remember it. Keep it straight. but he's a coward because he hasn't been in battle yet, and he's a
he has
noob.
the trembles.
He's the trembles.
And he's got to turn him into rages.
Yes. And he's a rookie, so therefore he can't be trusted. And Chakotay tries to counsel him, tell him, courage is not the absence of fear. You can be afraid, have the trembles, and still not be a coward. And of course, it doesn't work because that's not what the indoctrination program wants him to be saying and to take out of it. But I like the idea that we're kind of deal with this idea of what is true courage, what is bravery.
I'm kind of surprised they didn't pull out and here's a picture of my girlfriend back home that I'm gonna go see when this is all done, because that was that's the trope of this is the new guy that hasn't faced combat yet, and of course he's gonna die.
Right. I mean, yeah, I recently watched both Band of Brothers and The Pacific, and that's clearly a thing that comes up in both of those. Done much better, of course.
And of course that's gone back to John Wayne era. I mean, that's a classic movie trope.
I've heard that courage doesn't mean not being afraid speech. I don't know how many dozen times.
Right. Yeah, it's not new here. So I also found it interesting that they bring up the Vori beliefs about the afterlife, the glorious way after, whatever it is.
The glorious way, gloried way after.
I
really like that too. We learn a little bit about their funeral customs. One of their criticisms of the Kraden is that the Kraden they apparently when if they have time after they've killed one of the funny talkers, they will stake them to the ground, tie their arms to stakes and spread them apart and put a chin strap under them and force them to look up at the sky, which, according to the funny talkers, means they will never get to the good place in the afterlife. You have to apparently be turned face down, and they conceive of heaven as being within their planet. And so you've got to descend to heaven. And that's a nice variation, that I can imagine some people having in the universe. People want to go be with their gods in the afterlife, and some deities are conceived of as being celestial up in the sky, like God in the Judeo-Christian tradition. He's traditionally pictured as being up in the sky, which is why we depict heaven as being up in the sky. But in other cultures, in addition to celestial deities, they also had aquatic deities, and they had chthonic deities that were understood to be underground. And so if you want to go to the good place and be with your deities and have a big party, you would need to go underground if you have chthonic deities.
I kept thinking about the implications of this, having to be face down. It's like, how quickly do they have to be turned face down?
There's obviously a limit. It apparently has to be pretty quick. Otherwise, you just turn everybody face down after you find them.
Yeah. Even the burial is interesting too, with the bury them under the rocks, that sort of thing.
Yep. Yeah. And thinking about it, if I was with these people and, like Chakotay was, and it's like, please turn me face down, as he's dying, he says that at one point, I would turn him down face down. How do I know what his afterlife is like? He's not a human.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. May as well. I mean, just as respect.
Honor his burial wishes.
Yep.
And the interesting, they have the burial scene. It's really interesting to see. And Chakotay is the most spiritual of all the crew, the most, who has acknowledged the spirituality of one sort or another. So it's interesting that he's the one who's in there. And it's kind of interesting, this era of Star Trek with DS9 and Voyager. There's a lot of spiritual referencing going on, religion in these two series. Maybe it has to do with the people involved in these series embracing that. So that was good. Now, something else, a little bit of criticism of the Vori. They have terrible small unit tactics.
Oh, they are so incompetent.
They're terrible.
There is, I've got in my notes here, turning. Okay. So, after they find this group of fellow fighters that have been ambushed and killed by the Kraden, the commander, whose name is Brone, is shouting in the middle of the darkened woods.
Yeah.
And he's making, and I have in my notes, Commander shouting an anti-Kraden morale speech will get you attacked, ... And it does.
Yes. They're all clustered up too. Entire all like in this big like cluster
Clearing.
grouping.
Yeah.
Where like no one, they're not spread out. You know, one grenade is going to take out the entire the entire squad.
No one is standing picket. You know,
Right.
Yep.
I kind of and like the uniforms didn't look like uniforms, and it just felt like they could have gotten a little more effort to make it more military. Like I feel like it should have felt like this was a military unit, regular army.
They tried to make it look camouflage. I mean, but it didn't look like any military uniform I'm familiar with for camo.
Right, it was all jumpers, and it just didn't act like a military unit. There was like a militia at best,
Right. I mean, they use actual firearms. I mean, it's a modified Ruger, but it's still,
Yeah. And apparently the Vori, I know that the Kraden were aware of, space, and but the Vori must have been aware of space travelers and stuff. They weren't really fazed by him from being away.
Well, that was kind of interesting. Actually, you read the description on Paramount Plus, it talks about how Chakotay decided to go against the Prime Directive. Well, clearly that's not the case because there might be other directives, there might be other Starfleet protocols he went against, but not the Prime Directive.
Well, I think even with spacefaring cultures, you're not supposed to, take sides in their wars. Maybe I think that's what maybe they're referring to.
Like I said, that could be the second directive. I don't know.
I guess.
I mean,
Prime Directive is about not interfering in the natural development of other cultures.
Right.
With a pre-warp civilization, just letting them know that warp exists and other civilizations exist would be interfering. But into getting in one side of a war is also interfering in the natural development of civilization.
Has it ever occurred to you that the Prime Directive is impractical and ethically indefensible?
Exactly.
I'm not defending the Prime Directive. I'm just noting that it's as written. We violate the directive as much as we follow it in Star Trek. That's for sure. So the terrible small unit tactics of the Vori really stood out to me. Frankly, I take a bunch of kids playing Call of Duty over these guys. One thing that was weird at the end was, why was Tuvok wearing a Kraden uniform? That
just as a symbol of his conversion to their way of thought.
Not Chakotay, Tuvok.
Okay. Yeah, that made no sense. Presumably, it could be defended as this is battle armor that is known to resist Vori weapons.
Okay.
Whereas maybe just wearing a Starfleet pajama would not do that for you if you're going into a combat zone.
Right.
That was one of the things that stuck out to me. Another thing that kind of made me uncomfortable was the whole thing with the little girl and Chakotay. It felt, I don't know. They didn't exactly cross any lines, but she was too young.
Oh, well, okay. So let's back up a second. So there's this little girl. Her name is Karia. She lives in this settlement, and which turns out is all fake. But she lives in this settlement, and she comes up to Chakotay when he arrives with the other villagers, and she puts a really skimpy looking wreath around his neck and says, "Welcome, glory defender," or something like that. And then they cut to Chakotay having a meeting, and he's like eating food and stuff that they've given him, having a meeting with the village elders, and then the village elders leave, and she comes in, and I forget exactly what she says, but it was could be read in a suggestive way.
Right.
And I was concerned, are they really going to go there with a child this young? And then they didn't. It was ambiguous. It could be read suggestively, but it didn't have to be. And it turns out where they did go was she's got this brother that is a member of a unit that Chakotay knows has just been wiped out. And she's like, writes a letter to her brother that she wants him to take. And he kind of puts her off. He says, "I'm not going to where your brother is. I'm going to this other place." She says, "Well, you can give it to them and they can forward it to my brother." And he eventually, and I'm wondering, okay, so legitimate writing question, is he going to tell her that her brother's probably dead? and he doesn't. And he ends up taking the letter. And I say, okay, that's nice. I like that. But I did have a kind of moment of panic when they got to the line that could be read as suggestive. It's like, whoa.
Well,
but it didn't have to be read that way. And so I interpreted it as that's just a bad line.
Well, and it got kind of creepy too, where when the Kraden had taken over the village and they were in that little cave, and she, Chakotay stands up against the Kraden, gets knocked over, and then she cuddles up with him for a reason.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's all can be innocent, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, it's the world we live in today, I suppose, but it kind of leads to some of this. But I kind of wish they'd picked, I don't know, older, not 12, but 17, like 18.
Even if you have, I mean, it doesn't really bug me. I mean, like if you've got, whatever it is, Rooster Cogburn or whatever it is, if you've got an 8-year-old cuddling up to John Wayne for protection in a cave against people who have just been killing their people, I'm not going to fault that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't like egregious. It just,
bizarre.
like you said, Jimmy,
strange.
It kind of felt weird to me, but, because like you said, it could have gone wrong, but it didn't. And that's fine. So I thought I'd mention that. That made me feel. At the end of it, I kind of like, there's a bit of a, this is the lesson for the show moment, but it's not a bad, that for Chakotay to come right out and say, I wish it were as easy to stop hating as it was to start. And it's an acknowledgement of, logically, he recognizes the Kraden are not his enemy. The Vori were not what he thought they were, but
we don't know who's really bad in this situation. Right. Maybe they both are.
And the people that he's mourning or wanted to defend weren't even real. And so I can see that's confusing. And yet sometimes you just don't have a logical reason to, he hasn't had time to process. And so we just, and I would think that everybody else would be understanding that what he's just been through. Yeah. They don't seem to get it, but, so I thought that was an interesting moment.
And they had a line early on when they were first starting the brainwashing where he says, hate's not something I understand well. And my first thought was, except Cardassians.
Except Cardassians, right.
I mean, he does understand hate well, and that's part of the problem. That's part of his backstory.
Yeah. He abandoned Starfleet because of the Cardassians. It was... Yep. I mean, maybe he wouldn't describe it as hate, but more as like righteous indignation and a desire for justice or something. But yeah. Any other thoughts on this episode, Father Cory?
Nothing here.
Jimmy?
Nope.
All right. So I mentioned that we'd had some feedback. This comes from way back in episode 166, Shuttle Pod 1 from Enterprise. This is from...
That's the one where Trip and Malcolm get stuck on the comet nucleus on Archer's comet, because wow, we find a comet nucleus just like there aren't a trillion of them literally in our own solar system.
So this comment comes from Truly Awesome New Mexico Catholic on YouTube, who writes, despite the many just criticisms, this is a fun episode. Lifeboat episodes are cool, and the two characters are cool. Thanks for these cool discussions.
Cool.
Cool of you to say so.
Yes. Fezzes are cool too. So thank you. All right. We would like to take a moment now to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of Star Trek, including Father Dean M., Anthony H., Arthur, Connor B., and Jan P. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode. So that's it from us. We'd love to know what you thought of this Voyager episode, Nemesis, not the movie, that's later. Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord. You can watch The Secrets of Star Trek on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, where you can also leave a comment. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Enterprise episode, Vox Sola. Until then,
One
Jimmy
voice.
Akin?
That
One
sounds like
voice.
it ought to be a pop song.
One voice, or the hymn from
Queen.
church. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
And Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, if we greet the Nemesis in the trunks, you'll fire like the rest. As long as you're with us, you do my tellings. Fathom?
Fathom.